All right. So welcome to this training session for Groundstory. My name is Jessa Gilo. I've met some of you face to face, and some of you have only spoken on the phone. There's a little picture of me. I guess I can turn on my video too, so you can see me while I'm talking, if you would like. But there's a picture of what I actually look like. So you can follow along and imagine I'm a real person and I'm not a computer. We're all in the cloud, but this is actually about, it's about Groundstory, which is very much about not living in the clouds, but what's happening to our lives on the ground. So this is a training session for volunteer researchers for Groundstory. To position us here rooted in the ground and not in the cloud. The picture that's on this slide is where I live. Between the Y here and this curly building off to the side, this small building in the middle of these two big towers is where I live. It's the Artscape Triangle Lofts. Oh, we've got a phone call. Probably someone saying I can't connect. One second. Hello, Jessa speaking. Hi, we just started the training session, so if you can connect online, that'd be great. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. We're multitasking. Sorry about that, and I'm just going to mute my phone so we won't get another interruption. And let's actually, before I get too far in, let's see who else, if someone else is waiting to get in. Let's just keep it at this not so lovely screen at the moment, so I can let people in here. Okay. So as I was saying, this is where I live, and this is the building itself. This here is the curly building, and then this big taller brown building is the taller one here. Just to position where we are. And really, Groundstory comes from my story of moving into this building and watching the changes in my neighborhood as a result of gentrification and urban revitalization. So a little bit about this building. Artscape Triangle Lofts is kind of built on the options for homes model, where 25% of the value of the unit is subsidized, in this case, not by Options for Homes, but by Toronto Artscape. There are 68 units in the first 3 floors of the lower portion of this building, not in the tower. The first 3 floors are dedicated to artists. 20 units were for rent, and 48 of the 68 units were sold to artists and arts professionals, going back into 2010, 2011, when the building was open to the public. And I'm an owner. I bought, and it was only affordable because I was getting outbid for almost 5 years before I moved into this building by $75,000, $100,000 on units that I could afford in the under $200,000 range all over Toronto. I was getting vastly outbid on prices going back 10 years ago now, and was very unsuccessful in finding housing beyond rental housing. For more than 4 years. And then the Artscape building came to be, and I managed to get a spot in here. How it works is that 25% of my mortgage is covered in perpetuity by Toronto Artscape. They got some public funding that helped them purchase the mortgages for those units. It's for the sale, the units that were for sale. The units that are for rent are rented at 25% below market rate, in essence. So there's a similar deal for those units. They vary from just under 500 square feet to about 1,500 square feet for the largest, if I remember. It might be a little bit smaller than that. And it basically made housing affordable for me. And not moving all over town all the time with housing that I was not happy with. So this is the Queen West Triangle area. So to the west, in this direction, is Dufferin Street. To the south is King, going this way. Going in this direction below is Queen, and Dovercourt is off to the east or to the left of the image. Just to get you an idea of where this part of town is. So let's move on to the next image. The agenda for today's meeting is a little bit more about where Groundstory comes from and how it was inspired by my experience here in the Queen West Triangle between Queen and King and Dufferin and Dovercourt. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the collective impact framework and just so you have a sense of how the research, the goals and the methods, and how you're going to be contributing as a volunteer fits into the larger overall framework of this initiative going forward for the next many years. So we're going to talk about the overall research goals and methods, including opportunities for volunteering, the core objectives that I have for you as volunteers, particularly with regards to the research, a little brief overview on the actual research process and where you can find more information. We've got lots of videos now online. If you haven't found them, I'll show you where they are. And you can also get this presentation at the link down there at the bottom in OneDrive, your Shared With Me folder. And if you have trouble finding that, I can point it to you at the end of this presentation with the Q&A. You just let me know, and I can share the screen and show you where it is specifically. Okay, so Groundstory getting to here. Let's go back to 2006, where the census data, which was actually not processed and available until 2010, this map is a summary of concentration of artists by labor force, by percentage of labor force in different neighborhoods in Toronto. It was a custom analysis of 2006 census data by Hill Strategies Research in Hamilton. It was commissioned by the City of Toronto, the City of Hamilton, the City of Ottawa, and the City of Calgary. There was basically a detailed neighborhood analysis in each of those cities of where artists are living. This is just the map of Toronto, and we'll notice in yellow here, the only area that is 6 to 7% labor force of artists is in Parkdale, which is immediately west of where I'm located. I'm basically right on the boundary of the Parkdale area. I'm officially in West Queen West, which is just slightly less at 5.5% of the labor force. And this story of, where artists lived 10 years ago and where they're living now is ultimately where Groundstory is coming from, because I don't think this map is holding true anymore. We don't necessarily know. We don't have the data, but the story is, as we go through some of these slides, the story is that actually artists, this map doesn't hold true anymore at all. This is not how artists in the city look like. They've moved in significantly. But this is the data we have going back to 2006, where also in Parkdale, the average income in Parkdale was $16,400 per year for artists, compared to $28,700 per year for the overall labor force across the city. In Parkdale itself, it was about $32,500 as the overall labor force income, if I remember correctly. Imagine, actually owning property at $16,400. You're renting, and you're renting low-income housing as much as possible. So just remember this map as we proceed through the rest of the talk. And I've got some participants waiting here, so let's let them in. Welcome, Nicole. We've started, so we're just going to carry on. Hopefully you can hear us all right. Okay, so after the survey data, not when the survey was done, but after the survey data, around late 2006, 2007, there was a plan by the City of Toronto to revitalize the Queen West Triangle where I live. The orange area is ultimately where my building got built. It was an abandoned field at the time of this picture. And the yellow area, the big building in yellow, is 48 Abel Street, which was a famous arts building that had been taken. It was an abandoned manufacturing building, and a bunch of artists moved in and made studios out of it for a really long time. And this revitalization of this area caused a lot of up in arms at the time because of this building was going to be torn down. So this is what the area looked like in 2007. This here is 48 Abel Street. It's 3 stories. It's quite long. It goes way over here. You can't see it. But it's a big, long building. Behind Wolfitz, which is the gallery, the art supply store, right here. By 2009, construction had already started. There were buildings along Queen that had been torn down. 48 Abel was still existing, but my building, which is 38 Abel Street, right behind 48 Abel Street, is already at 3 stories by 2009. So moving along quite quickly, and other buildings along Sudbury are also in construction. By 2012, the first stage of the triangle has been completed, and I actually moved into my building. This is 38 Abel Street right here, with the big tower that's attached to it, which is a different address. I moved in 2011, so this was a year after that. But at that time, 48 Abel is gone. And in seeing the revitalization of the neighborhood, Wolfitz, the art supply store, did a big renovation of their building as well. By 2014, a lot of the new buildings are basically nearly finished or finished. 2016, things are pretty much wrapped up in terms of the major construction. There's now a park is being built and finalized here. What happened with this area was most of these buildings were built by Urban Core, which was a very respectable developer in the city at the time, and they were actually building buildings all over the city. They have many kind of subsidiary companies building buildings all over the city, including the 38 Abel Street where I live. That was a partnership with Toronto Artscape, the City of Toronto, and Urban Core to build these buildings over here. By 2016, the holding companies that were building the Triangle Lofts and the rest of the Queen Triangle area had gone bankrupt. And it wasn't just our area, it was all over the city, where a bunch of buildings that were supposed to be built and the down payments had been made, or in my case, in the Queen West Triangle, and it's true to this day, all of the ground floor building spaces on all of these buildings here in the Queen West Triangle are still sitting vacant and incomplete because Urban Core went bankrupt. There are buildings that didn't get built, even though they had the down payments of families to build the buildings. They didn't get built. In order to recover the loss of Urban Core's financial woes, a holding company or a receivership company, KSV Advisory, took over their debt. And the building immediately next to mine made national news when, just before the Ontario government implemented a new policy about not being able to increase rental prices beyond inflation, because there was a rule that you could increase for new buildings to whatever amount you wanted, but for older buildings you couldn't. And the receiver company, in order to recuperate the debt that they had on this building, Just next door, they increased. They told the rental residents of this building in April that in July they were going to double their rent. So one bedroom went from $1,650 to $3,300, which is crazy. This sounds like Manhattan kinds of rent for me. And it was as a result of this, and there was other buildings, and there was a few other trickles. As a result of this, it really pushed the government to implement their new policy to not allow this kinds of things to happen. But this has just been creating a lot of pressure on my neighborhood. Because if this unit can be rented for $3,300, then why not in this building? And why not in this building? This building here is supposed to be for low-income housing, and the first 3 floors, is for artists. But if the building next door is $3,300, it's creating property assessment upward pressure on the value of our units over time, which is impacting my income taxes from one year to the next. My unit in just 5 years has gone up $60,000, $65,000. So my income taxes that I'm paying on my property are based on these assessments, and so I'm paying quite a bit more on income taxes for my property than I was 5 years ago. And that's challenging the affordability for not just myself, but other members in the building. Welcome, Nicole. Sorry, I just let you in. So welcome. We've started and moving through now with a little bit more context on the area that I'm living in. So if you remember the distribution of artists across the city in 2006, this is income in the Triangle area, and so this is the railway lines along Sudbury, this is Spadina, this is going to be Dufferin right here, Bathurst is going to be in the middle somewhere, Trinity Bellwoods Park is over here. This is a summary of average household incomes in 2006, with light yellow being around Alexandra Park, which is where the social housing is, and over getting close to Parkdale is lower income, and really the only high 110,000 is right around Trinity Bellwoods, which is no surprise there. But by the time we have data in 2015, look what's happened. There's almost no low income of 20,000, 35,000 in this entire area, just in less than 10 years. Everything's changed, and really the only low income area is Alexandra Park, and there's now proposals to revitalize Alexandra Park, just like they have Regent Park on the east side of Toronto. So, we're right, I live right in this area here with Beaconsville Village, and, there's a significant change from the previous. It used to be actually in the pretty low income, and it's basically incomes have doubled. Partly because of what's happening in the Triangle, I think, but we don't actually know. Also from the STAR, the same study, they're mapping where are the gentrifying areas, how they decided what was a gentrifying area is basically a change of 20% or more in income from the previous year. If I remember correctly, I haven't looked at the article in some time, but it was something like that. And so here, Queen West and Leslieville are the most rapidly gentrifying areas in the city, with some other areas up in the northern regions. And the Junction is a big one now. This was from 2006, but there's a lot happening in the Junction right now as we speak. Okay. So still, however, even though we have all this change, we're still celebrating that where artists are living is in these traditional neighborhoods of Trinity Bellwoods, Parkdale, Davenport. So this is a study of new members to SOCAN in May 2017. and they're celebrating these as the major creator growth centers. So why are you becoming a member in 2017? Because maybe you can't afford your housing anymore and you need to do something to try to make more money. But, Trinity Bellwoods, Little Portugal, Christie Pitts, Brockton, Parkdale, Dufferin are all in the top major creator growth centers, so where musicians are living or members of SOCAN are living, but we don't really know what is the detail of this data. What is this saying? Is it saying, why are they becoming members? Maybe it's because they're desperate and that they're trying to save their house, but we don't really know. We certainly have stories like Ron Sexsmith leaving town quite publicly saying, I can't afford to live here anymore, I'm moving to Stratford. In 2017, in 3 months, there were 7 music venues that were closed because of increasing property rents and property prices. Art galleries in the West End and live workspaces up where the new MoCA is. All kinds of artists are being forced out of there because of redevelopment plans and increases in rent. We're just storefront theaters who've been, because they can't find places to share their work, have been going into storefronts on streets, and their property rents are going up as well, and they can't afford to stay there. So it's pretty much every discipline. We're hearing these stories all over Toronto that they're being forced out. Oops, sorry, my apologies. Let's get back to where it should be. All right. Other things that's happening kind of right now, the Toronto Music Advisory Council has been around actually since Rob Ford, but it's quite active still, trying to address this, the news of musicians in particular not being able to stay in the city. Hamilton's got a similar strategy to try to save the music industry in Hamilton and to try and grow it and allow artists to stay in Hamilton. A colleague of mine, Andres Kalogianidis, has founded the idea of a Toronto Music City. It's a cooperative next to the Regent Park development that's going to be explicitly for musicians, where they have studio space to record and rehearse inside their building in addition to their lofts. OCAD University, along with York, Ryerson, and U of T, have launched a multi-year study, multi-sector study to try to understand where their students are living and how much they're spending on their housing and how much further and further away they're being forced from their campuses, because that's the story. They've done analyses that I'm aware of in the past, and this is just sort of a continuation of this study. They want to know how bad is it for the student population. OCAD is in a very gentrified neighborhood. There's very little affordable housing. How far are OCAD students being forced away from the OCAD campus in order to live and afford to go to school? The City of Toronto is just wrapped up on October 13th a consultation series around a new economic development and cultural division strategy for 2018 to 2022 to look at some of these issues. So there's lots going on currently here locally to try to respond to not only what's been happening in Trinity Bellwoods and in the Artscape neighborhood here in the Queen West Triangle, but across the city. So we're trying to, as an effort here for Groundstory, to bring some of these efforts together and hopefully have a better collective impact by sharing learnings and sharing resources rather than having all these things happening in isolation with not a lot of connection between them. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the collective impact framework and what it looks like for the next year or so and how the research connects into it. So what is collective impact, first of all? Collective impact brings funders, business, not-for-profits, government, and citizens and impacted people together in a very structured and deliberate way to try to develop stronger connections and stronger shared efforts in order to achieve systemic change around very, very complex issues. So when we think about complex versus, say, complicated, for some of you, baking a cake might be complicated, but there's a recipe, and once you understand the instructions well enough, you can usually bake a cake successfully. A next step up, fairly big step up, might be going to the moon. That's still complicated because once you've done it once or twice, there's usually a lot of knowledge that's been built around it. And again, there's a recipe of how to get to the moon that, if you have the adequate resources and you have an understanding of the knowledge, you can get yourself to the moon as well. What collective impact is trying to address is complex issues that have no recipe. They are different in every population, every neighborhood, every community that you're trying to address them in, because the roots, the causes, and the effects are very, very different. So the easiest example I can think of for this is if you have a child, you raise a child and you learn all kinds of things about their personality and what they like, and then you have a second child and you think, oh great, this is gonna be really easy because I can just apply all my lessons of my first child onto my second child, and whammo, the second child has a completely different personality, and nothing that you do to assuage their cries and tears works because they are different. The recipe of the first child does not at all apply to your second child. And you have to start from scratch. This is the idea of solving complex issues in our society. So, building a new building is complicated, but building the correct building that's equitable and inclusive to solve gentrification and unequal equality in a community is complex. And that's what collective impact is trying to do in terms of systemic change. It's trying to look and better understand what the drivers are, what are the roots and causes that's in the system that's causing, say, poverty or climate change, and by bringing all these different people together, trying to solve those systemic drivers. There are 5 sort of preconditions to collective impact that have been set out. Just through shared knowledge and learning and using and adopting this framework. There's a common agenda where participating organizations are working towards an agreed common set of agendas and outcomes and a common theory of change that they evaluate their progress using shared measurement. So they will all report each year using the same database or using the same key quantifiable measures on their progress, and to be able to, as a collective, evaluate the overall movement of the effort. If each organization has its own measures and there isn't any kind of connection, it's going to be very hard to understand how well you're doing. So it's key to have shared measurement as well as a common agenda. Obviously, as a collective impact effort, partners need to work as a team where the activities are mutually reinforcing and not working at loggerheads with each other. There also needs to be continuous communication. Collective impact is a lot of work. It's often on the side of people's desks because they're doing so many other activities already. But it's important to have regular routine communications between the partners. Usually there's monthly leadership committee meetings and at least bi-monthly or quarterly advisory and community updates to keep everyone at the same table in terms of where things are progressing. And then there's a backbone support, which is helping to facilitate all these things. And this is what ArtsPond is trying to be for Groundstory. We're going to be the backbone support, providing all the coordination and dedicated support to all the members, all the partners at the table. There are lots of partners, and we need many, many more. I think in order to actually address this, we're going to need hundreds of partners at this table. But we've got about 45, approaching 50 now, including the City of Toronto, Toronto Artscape, OCAD University, Centre for Social Innovation, Options for Homes, a bunch of residents of the 401 Richmond Arts Hub, Gladstone Hotel for one of our businesses right here in the Queen West area. Former Mayor Barbara Hall, the Mayor of Toronto. Jay Pitter is an urbanist who's doing a lot of great work now around equitable inclusion of revitalizing neighborhoods and buildings for social housing here in Toronto. And she's been traveling all over Canada and around the world talking about how we can be more inclusive. So I'm really excited to have Jay and many more people. The big timelines, ultimately this is going to be a 10 or more year initiative. The first year is what we're looking at is helping to define what is going to be the desired impact for this initiative. And then the subsequent stages are to basically organize the team and the community to be prepared to then deliver the impact through very progressive interventions on the ground to try to move the needle in the area that we want to. In the coming year and a bit, we're going to cultivate the 45 plus partners as a leadership committee, and we'll invite advisory members who will support, kind of give moral support and won't be as actively involved in the day-to-day. You're going to help us with mapping the system, the landscape, through the International Literature Review. To supplement the literature review, if we get all the funding we're asking for, we're going to be doing 2 regional and 2 provincial roundtables, 2 focus groups, and 2 market research surveys for both artist and general populations around perceptions and realities of artists as contributors to gentrification. The purpose of all of this is to provide a solid evidence base for future support, to attract more partners, to attract more funders, and to help direct and define where the impact is going to be, how the interventions in the actual initiative are going to take place, is going to be built on evidence. And so this is the first stage of building evidence, identifying what data around the community exists and where the gaps in data is. To support the need for this and to support the kinds of interventions that we think are going to be necessary. With luck, we'll be able to pressure test some of the solutions that we identify with community feedback, but that may not be possible. We're also going to be engaging data scientists and data architects to help build the databases and the information exchange systems and procedures to help share the data that's been collected by all the different partners into some kind of shared measurement system. Throughout this year, as we're doing research, we're going to be doing community engagement and outreach, in particular to the impacted people with lived experience in gentrification and displacement and income equality, to help us guide the direction of this initiative. That's going to be really, really key. And at the end of the initiative, this stage, in the spring of 2019, we're going to be publishing a final report with recommendations for this second stage. So essentially, the pre-research is helping to get started on the international literature review, because there's so many sources, and I think it's going to take us 2 or 3 years to get through it all. So I would just thank you. Thank you so much for coming in at this stage. We hope to have the funding to allow us to formally launch in February or March of next year, where we'll bring the leadership committees together on sort of a monthly or bi-monthly. We'll deepen the landscape review even more. We'll start doing the focus groups, surveys, roundtables, the first round, with the second round being in early 2019. And the report's going out at the end of the spring of 2019. And hopefully we will then have money at that point for stage 2. So I'm going really, really fast because it's already 3:40 p.m. Hopefully you're following me here. Let's talk about the goals and process for the research. So for volunteer opportunities, I think most of you have seen these already, so I'm just going to go through them quickly. But if you haven't, there's lots of opportunities to basically take high-level notes on anything that piques your interest in the Zotero bibliography, or go and find news sources and add them to the bibliography. You can help keep the Zotero metadata up to date if that's your interest. If you're more a tech geek, then the data, we're going to have thousands and thousands of sources ultimately. So we want to make sure that the metadata is going to be clean and accurate and formatted nicely and so on. There's going to be a need for communication support in engaging team members and helping share lessons with each other, so that as we keep looking at new sources, we're informed by the research of the other members of the team. So that we can apply their lessons with our own research as well. So we're hopefully not, regurgitating the same old lessons all the time, that it's cumulative, it builds on each other. So I'd love to have a team member that's interested in helping distill knowledge and share knowledge with each other in an informal way. It doesn't have to be very academic, but pulling out some interesting tidbits that people learn and sharing it with team members. So that it's fun and we all are learning something outside of our own areas that we're looking at. If you're really interested in writing, then I'd like to, as we identify some learnings, I'd like to have some short blog articles and maybe even some more detailed critical précis and analysis of resources that we can then share to the sector on the Groundstory website. So if you're really interested in having your name and your writing out there in the public, then we'll create a profile for each writer on the Groundstory website, so your name is public and your writing is public. If you're more a methodology tech head or love process, then you can help provide feedback to me and other team members that are leading this research on defining and clarifying and cleaning up any kind of the methodologies that we're using to make them better or more effective, especially as we get deeper into our learnings. We'll want to make sure that everything's nice and clean and working well. So the core objectives. Thank you so much for coming. You have no idea how much your time means to me. This is not a small initiative, and for me, it is really, really key that you are benefiting as much as ArtsPond is from your time and your effort in coming and bringing your passion here into this project. So I want you to have fun. I want you to have meet new people. If those are why you're here, then let's make sure that those things happen. There's already 20 members that have signed up for this initiative as volunteers. So we've got a team of people. I'm happy to introduce each other. We can have potlucks or do whatever we like. If you're really keen on that, we can do that. If you're more about building your professional skills and resources and getting a letter of reference, then I can do that too. I want to make sure that you get what you want as a volunteer out of this initiative. As the research progresses, some of the key things that we want to discover is what's happening locally and around the world around this issue of gentrification, and learning and sharing our lessons with each other to help set a foundation of knowledge for Groundstory. Oh, there's a nice little typo. Let's fix that in the future for my own initiative. I don't know how to spell it. Core questions. What are the roles of the arts in gentrification and displacement? What are the public's perceptions of artists for the same? So how are artists contributing to gentrification or urban revitalization? Is it positive what artists are doing in neighborhoods? Is it not so great? Are they causing displacement? Are they preventing displacement? What are other key drivers of gentrification? If artists aren't contributing to gentrification, well, what is? And how do we address it? And what role is the arts in doing that? Can the arts be used as a means to engage people and get people excited about the need to respond to this? So we can use art to inform people. We're not to blame, but we can educate people about the need to respond and become engaged and active around responding to this issue. Where are Toronto and Hamilton, Ontario artists living and working? If they're being impacted, if they're being displaced, where are they going? We don't actually have a very clear idea of where artists are living right now. What challenges are they having in accessing affordable shelter and spaces of work? If we can't find any scholarship about this that's recent, then we can look at other cities around the world and see, for examples of, okay, what challenges are artists around the world having in different cities, and what are the responses? What are the other regions doing? How are they responding to these challenges? Are there relationships between artists and non-artists, small businesses, other low-income families? Is there a common experience there, or is it very, very different in terms of lack of affordable housing and displacement? What range of tools, policies, interventions are working and not working in terms of either preventing gentrification if we're trying to preserve a neighborhood, or better understanding where gentrification is happening? What are the key areas we need to invest our resources in for deeper research? So if you find a resource that's really fascinating, and we need to dive deeper and find more resources like it, that's going to be a really key learning for us. So to help us direct future research is also a big question for us. And what do we know and what don't we know about this issue? Where are our comfort areas and where are we uncomfortable? I've talked about roots, ripples, and responses to most of you on the phone or through email, but here's a summary. So these are the core questions that I want all the research to be framed in for now. The roots are, what are the drivers and causes of gentrification? And we can look at, what regions are we actually going to try to focus this initiative on yet? We don't know exactly what's going to be affordable and what's going to be deliverable. Is it going to be just in Davenport, all of Toronto? Are we going to include Hamilton, the GTHA, all of Ontario? Can we address gentrification around the world eventually? Probably not, but just to be a little facetious there. Ripples are, what are the effects, both positive and adverse, of gentrification? Neighborhood revitalization, social spatial displacement, loss of affordable housing, loss of cultural spaces, greater inequality and polarization of income, of access to services, of cultural identity and sense of place. There's lots of things here that could come in under ripples. The roots I actually didn't talk about is, the role of the arts we did talk about in the earlier slide, but in terms of the causes of gentrification, there could be almost anything from skateboarders to economic factors to new immigrants to basically anything has been blamed for gentrification or revitalization. So there's social, cultural, economic, political, geographic factors, and many, many others. The transformation of our economy from industrial to post-industrial to now potentially showing signs of a post-capitalist world with the gig economy and increasingly precarious work with, we're all contractors for Airbnb and et cetera, and Uber. These things may be contributing to gentrification over time. What are the responses? So ultimately, the solutions is where I'd like this area to be focused, but it's equally valid as a response to protest or try to mitigate the impacts and the effects of gentrification. You could map them. Where are they happening? You could try to predict where they might happen in the future. Trying to preserve neighborhoods from being gentrified, trying to revitalize neighborhoods, but focusing on equitable, inclusive development, community land trusts or affordable housing or economic incentives are all some kind of specific responses. Other collective impact efforts beyond Groundstory. If you find any or you're interested in this topic of collective impact, there are thousands of collective impact initiatives in poverty and in education and climate change. There may be potential learnings that we could get from some of those. So there's an overall of the core questions. Just go through these really quickly. This slide is available, as I said, in our file, so you can go and look at these at your leisure. But these are some examples from the Zotero archive of some resources that are there that I haven't actually had time to read in any detail, but they're there. This one by the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis identified 40 causal drivers for unaffordable housing in the GTA. By using big data and machine learning analyses of, I forget how many databases. There was something like 30 previously unconnected databases of all kinds of different data sources that was connected in this big data machine learning analysis to find the causal correlations between public policy and different kinds of interventions on the ground that are causing unaffordable housing. So this is going to be a really interesting study to dive into. Neighborhood Change is a 7-year research initiative. It's now in year 6, I believe, looking at the roots and ripples of income inequality and unaffordable housing and income polarization and poverty in Toronto initially, and then they got additional funding to go across Canada. So there are tons of papers, and I've put some in Zotero, but this is a huge archive of resources, so quite academic, but could be very useful to try to pull out some key ripples and key roots in this resource. In San Francisco, Karen Chappell has done some work around trying to map neighborhood change and susceptibility to gentrification. So this is an interesting study. Another one coming out of Portland is trying to map gentrification. And in Denver and in Washington, I believe it's Washington, the Urban Institute, I believe, is in Washington. They've done 2 studies around mitigating displacement or mitigating the effects of gentrification by looking at specific case studies. Denver did what they are doing in Denver and what's working and what's not working, and the Urban Institute looked at a number of different local efforts to mitigate the effects of displacement. Gio Loom is a new tool that's been developed by the city of Baltimore, which is actually not being gentrified. They're more in the ghettoization side. They're struggling with their economy, and they're interested in preserving awareness of culture in their municipality. So they've created a tool that's going to map locations of cultural hotspots over time. So this could be useful for mapping and preserving culture in a municipality. The World Cities Cultural Forum is a collaboration of multiple cities around the world that are interested in preserving and developing culture as an economic driver in their metropolitan areas. And Toronto through Toronto Artscape, is a member of this group. They've done conferences and a lot of research there as well. This book is just the impact of artists on contemporary development throughout all of Europe. So that could be an interesting resource. This really launched me into deciding that we need to do Groundstory. Carl Grodash is the new Richard Florida, in my view, in trying to understand the role of the arts in urban development. He's done some very detailed work looking at not just the creative industries, but looking at fine arts, looking at visual arts, looking at performing arts, and what is their role in displacement and in gentrification. And he's created correlation maps, and this is sort of his correlation map of the fine arts and community arts and the different disciplines and growth and displacement and gentrification and the correlations he's discovered between them. And So the end result of all of this is that the fine arts and the performing arts, in his study of 30 major metropolitan areas in the U.S., is suggesting that the fine arts and the performing arts have a negative correlation to gentrification and displacement, which is not something that sort of a fine understanding that we've had that's been missing in a lot of Richard Florida's work, which is taking creative industries as a broad brush and not looking at the individual roles of different disciplines. So if you're very interested in data and detailed statistical mappings, this kind of work may be of interest to you. The last one I'll share is the Ontario Ministry of Culture. This goes back to about 5 or 6 years ago, along with a federal funding program called FedDev, supported the creation of cultural plans all over Ontario. And this is a map of southern Ontario, where the cities that have created cultural plans to try to develop the power of culture in their communities to support, to celebrate their community, but also as an economic driver. Unfortunately, since about 2010, the vast majority of these plans are sitting on the shelf. They were written, but then nothing happened with them. So this is a problem, especially if we start looking at artists being displaced from Toronto into these communities. If their cultural plans are sitting on the shelf and not activated, then they're not going to be able to maximize and support artists that are moving into their communities. Okay, we're almost at 4 o'clock, so I hope you can stick with me for a few more minutes. I just want to give you a very high level on the research process. So you're going to locate and check out a resource in Zotero using an under review, and actually it's not owner, it's owned, O-W-N-E-D, my apologies, is what we're going to be using, owned with your initials. So that's how we know inside Zotero that you've claimed this resource and no one else will use it. You're then going to use OneNote to capture your overall summaries and working notes. If you need to use, if you want to have bit more formatting control and you're working, say, on an entire book, then you can use Word to capture more formal, complex notes. And when you're done with those notes, you save those detailed notes in OneDrive and link them up into OneNote as a hyperlink to the summaries in OneNote. And then when all of that is done, you use our Microsoft form to let us know, okay, Jessa and the lead researcher team, I'm done making my notes. I'd like you to take a look at it. And once you've received approval, we're going to check those resources out of Zotero, or check them back into Zotero, and copy the approved summary into the notes field inside Zotero. That's a very, very quick, high-level summary, but that's the process. I was going to share this video. It's a few minutes of the training. Where do we go to get help in getting ourselves set up with Office 365, Zotero, and figuring out how the heck we're supposed to do the research and share our research correctly with a team? If you go, when you're on your home page, from Office 365 here, if you use the drop-down navigation button, and about halfway down there is a video link. I want you to click on that. That will take you to our video channels for training at the moment. There are popular videos that link up here, but in order to, on the homepage for videos, but in order to make sure that you don't miss anything, I'd like you to use the following channels: team orientation first, and then Groundstory orientation second. So if you click on the team orientation, yep. I thought I'd make it bigger. My apologies. Where do we go? Let's get it. How to use the following channels: team orientation first, and then Groundstory orientation second. So if you click on the team orientation, in this case, the 5 videos that are featured right here are probably the key ones. There's actually 6 in this series. but the 5 at the top here are the key ones. If we go and this basically provides you an introduction to how to get set up with Office 365, how to get OneNote and OneDrive working, and how to use our teams for collaboration informally as a social network. Then back under channels, Groundstory orientation is the more detailed orientation specific to Zotero and using OneNote for our note-taking. So these training series walk you through how to get Zotero set up and how to use it and how to take notes and share your notes with the team in Office 365. Not all the videos fit up in the featured area here. There's only 5, but there are actually 8 key ones in this series. There's an 8th one that's being processed at the moment. So if you hit all videos, the 8th one, when it's ready, will be available here. So there's only 7 at the moment. So just find the first video, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, 5, 6, 7, etc., and work your way through the series. The first 5 are up here at the top, but that's all there's room for. So just click on all videos, not on trending, and make sure you follow through the process of each of the videos to make sure you're doing things how we would like to have them done. If you have any questions about this training series, it's the first run on the training series, please let us know and we can make comments on the videos or redo them to make them a bit clearer. And we look forward to receiving that feedback. Hopefully they're helpful. And yeah, there we go. Okay, that's all I had planned. So why don't I unmute everybody and feel free to ask any questions that are burning on your mind that you're really stuck with and need some help here. So, or if you want to if you're having trouble with your microphone, then you can add them into the chat window and I'll just monitor that. So I'll unmute your microphones. And feel free to pop up with any questions. And if you have to go, I apologize for being a little late. If you have to go, I totally understand. And feel free to email questions. And I'll send out any kind of answers I've got to questions as needed here. So does anybody have any burning questions? Look, I'm having problems with your microphone, so maybe you're not connected.
So I have a question. I don't have access to the portal, so...
you should have been given... who's speaking, please?
Simona.
Simona, I should have emailed you a whole bunch of information with your login ID and password. I can resend it.
I got the first email with volunteer as a researcher, and probably that's why I didn't get the second. Maybe there was a second. I got the email also with the...
Okay. I'll resend it to you, Simona. The process is to go to portal.office.com and you'll get a website like this and you'll put in your ArtsPond email and your password and then sign in.
Okay.
So I'll make sure that that gets to you right after this meeting.
The password probably. So because you said that the email is first name, last name.
Yes.
That would be, but once provided a login password, that's...
Okay, yeah, I'll send it to you as soon as the meeting is over.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have questions?
And I have another question.
Yes.
So, how soon you want this seems to be done?
Whenever you have time. There is no timeline. It's whenever you have time. This is going to be probably a 10-year initiative, and there's going to be research for the entire 10 years. So you can. There are no expectations. You can come and go as you like, and if you're going to take months and months to complete a resource, then maybe don't check it out. Leave it for other people to look at. But if you can think you're going to finish it within 2 months or so, and you are going to finish it, then you feel free to check it out.
So don't be a problem for the others.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Thank you, Claire, for coming. See you later. Well, that's great then. Please do follow all through the training videos. I've tried to, there's about an hour and a half of training there, I think, or an hour and 15 minutes. It's a bit of an investment, but hopefully I'm going to answer all the questions that you will need to be successful in the research. And if you've got any problems at all, feel free to email me or give me a call. You've got my contact information. And I can help get you past whatever barrier you're experiencing to get yourself set up. So thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon, okay? Oh, Simone is typing something else there.
Yeah, so I was thinking also that if you send or put somewhere the video for the whole presentation would be really good. I'm over it. Yeah.
Yes, so there's the team orientation channel for the videos, and there is the Groundstory orientation channel, if you remember. This this video will be number 0 in the Groundstory orientation channel. So the first video is number 1. I'm just going to add a video of this presentation as number 0. So it'll be right at the top. Malika, you have questions? You're typing away there, so we'll hold a second. Thanks, Malika, for sending off the agreement. Yeah, I should mention that if you haven't sent a PDF of your volunteer agreement to me, please try to do that as soon as possible. It's my legal safety around the sharing of all this information, that you're not going to share it with anyone else without our permission, and that we're going to respect your rights as a human being, and all that good stuff is in there. So it's good that you can sign that as soon as possible. If you need me to send it to you by email again, I can do that. If you don't have an electronic signature, then you can print it out and mail it to me, or find some other way to get it to me. I don't have a fax machine, unfortunately, but if you can get an electronic version of it somehow, then that's probably going to be best. Danielle, you have a question? We'll hold one more second for Danielle. No? Don't want to hang up, but I don't want to keep everyone held there. Okay, great. We seem to be good, so let's finish off, and welcome to Groundstory. Thank you so much for your time today. Sorry when it went over time, and I look forward to working with all of you. And again, please don't hesitate to contact me if you get lost at all with any of the training or any of the systems that we're using. I'm here. You're not alone. And if you are, all of you are interested, we can schedule a face-to-face maybe a little potluck dinner or something, sometime in the very near future, so we can all meet each other and have a glass of wine, or before the snows fly, so we can all be a bit social as well. So let's do that in the next couple of weeks. I'll organize something and look forward to seeing you all. So farewell for now, and look forward to working with you. Bye!
Bye. Bye.